So, but thank you, Mr. Chair. And I really won't, I don't want to ask a lot of questions or talk very long. I just want to say this makes sense. And no matter what the talking points from the Democrats are, the fact remains that the Senate Democrats have not done their work. I think Mr. Harris laid that out very well in his opening statement and again in another response to the chairman. But we are in the position that we have to do this because the Senate Democrats didn't do their work. And I don't know if we can express that enough because there's so much going on from the talking points from the other side about veterans and about all kinds of things, all the other horrible things you can think of that, but then why didn't the Senate Democrats do the work if there was that much concern? And there was that. So that's all I really wanted to say, and Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Mr. Chairman? Our jobs here, and then we can blame the other people for not doing their jobs. But we haven't done our job here by any measure. I thank the gentleman. I yield back.
Sure. Thanks, the gentleman. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
I thank the chairman, and thank you, Chairman and Ranking Member, for your testimony today. Just to underscore a point that our ranking member of the Rules Committee, I think, well articulated, and just to be clear on the facts, my understanding is the House has not sent a single appropriations bill for the next fiscal year to the United States Senate. The House passed a few bills, as Mr. Harris mentioned. Of course, Republicans failed to pass appropriation bills for agriculture, rural development, Food and Drug Administration, commerce, justice, science, and related agencies, energy and water development and related agencies, financial services and general government, labor, health, and human services, education and related agencies, and then finally transportation, housing, and HUD. So, wide variety of appropriation bills that the Republican majority has failed to pass, and the limited bills they have passed, they've refused to send to the United States Senate for the Senate's consideration. So I think characterization to the contrary is a bit rich and untrue. Mr. Harris, I guess one question I wanted to ask you and get a better sense of, it's clear by virtue of your testimony and the decisions made by the Republican majority that the SAVE Act is very important to you and you believe important to the country. Is that a fair?
It's important to the American people, that's correct.
It's important enough, in your view, to attach to this continuing resolution, right?
In my view, and I think in the opinion of the American people, they expect that people in this country illegally are not going to be voting in federal elections.
And that's why you've added that provision to the CR, as opposed to taking that bill up in regular order next week or the week after or in October or November, right?
We did take it up, and if the gentleman will remember, it passed the House with 5 minority members agreeing and is sitting over in the Senate. So the bill has been taken up. It's just that we can't, Chuck Schumer refuses to do the work of the American people and, for instance, take up the SAVE Act, because again, I'll reiterate, I suspect that he believes it actually might pass in the Senate. And why it wouldn't, I'm not sure, because I think everyone should agree that people who are in the country illegally shouldn't vote in a federal election. But the fact is, we did take it up, and the Senate refuses, Mr. Schumer refuses to put it on the voting schedule in the Senate.
So then why put it in the CR?
Well, if it comes over with the CR, that's a, you know, and I've been around here long enough to know there are such things that are called must-pass bills. The CR is considered a must-pass bill at some point, and attaching something like the SAVE Act to it might actually reinforce with the American people that Congress actually does believe that only American citizens should vote in American elections.
And given that point, Mr. Harris, why not do the same thing for the $12 billion in funding that the VA needs to take care of our nation's veterans? If you believe that a signal of how important legislation is to include it in the CR, that it's something that can't be taken up during the duration of a CR through the next fiscal year through March of 2025, that demonstrates that it's an issue of vital importance. What could be more important than the $12 billion that the VA desperately needs to provide care for our nation's veterans? Why put that on the back burner?
So I'll remind the gentleman that the military construction VA bill that was passed by the Republicans in the House actually increased funding for the veterans, and the Democrat minority voted against increasing that funding for the VA. That bill is over in the Senate.
It's not in the Senate.
If we could,
you didn't send it.
Only the DHS bill was held pending passage of H.R. 2. So the Senate could take up their, if Mr. Schumer and the Democrat majority in the Senate felt that the veteran issue was so important, they in fact could take up the military construction VA bill in the Senate, and we could conference rapidly and solve this problem by next week. So I would suggest that, I mean,
Why not
that's
do it
my
now?
answer. I would suggest you write a note to Mr. Schumer and ask him why he's
Mr.
not
Harris,
taking them up.
I would just simply say, it is completely within the power of the Republican majority to address it today in this CR. It's not particularly complicated. The Republican majority could decide that addressing our veterans' health care needs is as important as the wide variety of other anomalies that the Republican majority has settled on, as important as the SAVE Act, as the Republican majority clearly believes it to be, and included in this bill. The Republican majority made a decision not to do so. I don't understand why, and I don't think the answer, or a answer, rather, that this can be something that can be addressed in December or January or February, that it can be addressed at some point during the pendency of a 6-month CR. I think that answer is not going to comport with the needs of the American people. I think they will find that answer deeply disquieting. Ranking Member DeLauro, if you care to expound on that.
Well, first of all, I would just say, let me just make a point on the issue of eligibility of non-citizens, whether to vote or otherwise. But what this CR does is shuts down the E-Verify program, I might add, which is our nation's system to confirm the eligibility of non-citizens to work lawfully in the United States. So it really
Could you
is-
just repeat that, Ranking Member DeLauro? You're saying
They
the
shut down-
Republican CR bill shuts down the E-Verify
E-Verify
program.
program,
Okay.
which is our nation's system to confirm the eligibility of non-citizens to work lawfully in the United States. So, it's a mic, it should be. Okay. I think it's this veterans issue is really a critical issue. There's a $12 billion shortfall, and I explained that the increase demand for services, we understood that when we passed the PACT Act because it extends to all altercations here. So $12 billion shortfall. It's medical services for veterans. And this is, you can read, the VA would have, this is the OMB, VA would have insufficient funding to maintain medical care operations for veterans through 2025. Absent this funding, VA need to begin addressing any potential shortfall as early as the first quarter of fiscal year 2025. So $0 here. And the most, and it's really a little crazy here because you look at section 144 of the CR, and it gives the VA authority to spend funding provided in this CR for medical service faster than they normally would be allowed. But there are $0 in the bill for medical services. So they're going to spend $0 as fast as they can. Now, it would be laughable if it were not serious for veterans that are faced with grave illnesses and they simply need to get their medical care. You know, to your point, you ask your colleagues in the majority, how hard is it to do the right thing? So,
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Ranking Member, and you know, this notion that the CR as written is some sacred parchment that can't be modified in any way is contravened by the manager's amendment that I understand Chairman Cole has submitted that would address some issues with respect to TANF funding. So clearly, it is within the majority's power to address what is a very salient issue, a distressing issue that the VA has identified. According to the Office of Management and Budget, I'll simply quote from their letter to the Congress that, quote, the VA would have insufficient funding to maintain medical care operations for veterans through fiscal year 2025, period. That's the bottom line. So a vote for this bill is a vote that ultimately would deprive the VA of their ability to care for our nation's veterans. It's why I'll be voting no on the CR, and why I'll be encouraging my colleagues to do the same. I yield back, Madam